the best writers and the best marketers aren't always the ones that we see or that we even think, hey, I need to work with that person. We see the person who has the visibility, who's out there talking about it.
Hey, Rob, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here, especially because you mentor copywriters. You know what this business is like when we're freelancing. Tell everyone hello and a
Okay.
little bit about you, how you got started. I love hearing how people started their businesses.
Yeah, well, I got started a long time ago. I mean, before the internet was really much of what it is. I started, actually, my real start in copywriting, I was planning on going to law school. I had taken the LSAT. I'd scored well enough. I was going to go to the school I wanted to. And I thought, well, maybe I'll add a master's of public administration at the same time. So the year before I was going to go to law school, I started this master's degree, and it was the most boring thing I'd ever been. Like, it was so boring. I was sitting in these classes thinking, it's not fair because they weren't law classes necessarily, but I just remember thinking, wow, I cannot do this. And about the same time, I met a girl at a party, and she kind of liked me and asked me to work on a freelance writing project with her. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll do the writing thing. The writing worked out. The girl thing didn't. And, I made $300 on that first project, writing an article it's for a company that doesn't even exist anymore. It was like a multi-level marketing company, and they needed some content for their newspaper, their actual newspaper that they sent out to their members. And yeah, when I realized I could make money writing, like, I was off to the races. And so I've worked in-house, I've worked at an agency, I've done creative director stuff, I've written TV and radio and print stuff. I did a lot of direct response mail and TV and radio, and eventually ended up working on my own as well.
So, did you do any formal training? Did you just jump right in?
So I didn't like have a degree in copywriting or anything like that, but I was really lucky to be paired with some senior writers at different times of
Mhm.
my career. When I was hired in-house as a copywriter, I was talking with the creative director, and obviously I had no experience other than this one article that I had written, and I was thinking I can write. I got a degree in history, so I knew I could write. And I just basically said to him, look, give me 3 months. If I don't deliver what you think I need to be delivering, I'll quit. You don't have to fire me. And I guess that was enough of a pitch. And he paired me with another senior writer, a guy named Brent Bluth, who's now retired. I owe a ton to him and how he taught me, the basics of writing. We had a subscription to Communication Arts magazine, so I studied that. I had a bunch of designers who were helping me. So I was mentored at that early stage, but nothing more formal than that.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So, what's your favorite thing to write copy for? Like, what do you like to write?
Today, sales pages. I love sales pages and funnels. It's a fun problem to solve. And yeah, so if I get an opportunity to write a sales page, especially for like health supplements, that kind of a thing, I just love it. But I also write a lot of funnels for like SaaS or for our own products in the Copywriter Club.
Oh my goodness. What would you tell a copywriter who's just starting how to fast track what you just did?
But I mean, honestly, I don't know that fast tracking is what you want to do, because I think there's a ton of value in actually learning how to write an advertorial or an actual letter that's going to land in somebody's mailbox and see what the responses are. And so, yeah, I know a lot of people want to get to the upper levels really quickly, but I'm not sure there's the value is there. In fact, if you don't understand those basic things, it's way too easy to replace you these days with AI. I think it's learning, how to get a response, how to write, how to understand the customer that sets you apart from tools like AIs that can almost do our jobs now.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I wish I would have known about copywriting. I think I told you before we recorded that my background was journalism and I always had
Yeah.
a knack for writing. I did broadcast electronic media. I was the one girl who didn't want to be in front of the camera. And I only chose that because I didn't want to do print because I could tell it was archaic and like I just didn't feel like
You
I
were
wanted
ahead of
to be
me.
this.
I was the print guy for a long time.
Well, I knew I was going to be, I'll be straight up a slave to the college newspaper. And I did not want to do that. So I avoided it at all costs. But I just didn't know copywriting was a thing. And like, do you have any advice for someone who might be good at it? Or, you and I talked about this on our podcast, like feeling like you can compete that you can call yourself a copywriter when you don't feel like one, or when you see people like you with all this experience? Like, who is going to make a good copywriter, and how do we know we're ready to call ourselves that? I'm going to bring this up again because I know my audience struggles with it.
So there's a couple of different ways to answer this question, really. But if you want to be a copywriter, then you need to be writing copy, maybe even every day, right? And I'm not just talking about like hand copying what other people are doing, but writing actual copy for your business or for clients or for friends. If you can't find a client, find a friend that you can help for free. It's really important to get those first couple of assignments done. There's, a lot of times we hear this idea we shouldn't work for free. Well, you're not working for free if you're doing an assignment for a friend who can give you a testimonial. There's lots of ways to get paid. Money is only one of them. So working for a testimonial or for a case study or for experience, like all of those things are really valuable. Now, if you've been doing that for 5 or 6 months, it's time to start charging money, or even for, 3 or 4 clients, now it's time to start charging something for what you're doing, but you have to be writing. As far as when are you ready to call yourself a copywriter? Well, if you're writing copy, you're a copywriter. Obviously, you need to be doing something capably, right? Like you can't just be putting words on the page and nobody's responding or nobody's reading or you're not getting some kind of an action from them. Like that is part of writing good copy. But if you're getting that, if you can change people's minds, if you can get them to take action, if you can get them to click a button to download something or to buy something, you're a copywriter.
Yes. And what's the best place to get better at this? What would you suggest?
Well, I would say the Copywriter Club is a pretty good place to do it. We actually focus more on the business side of copywriting than on the actual writing side, although we do have some programs that will help people become better writers. But a lot of copywriters are pretty good at the writing part, and we're pretty bad at telling our story, at figuring out our products, our processes, how we talk about what we do, how to price what we do fairly so that we get paid what we deserve. And those are the kinds of things that we focus on at the Copywriter Club.
Okay, good. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you next. So, like, what a segue. What does your business look like now? Tell everyone what you do, especially if someone on my podcast hasn't met you before.
Yeah, so I kind of have two businesses. One is my freelance business where I write for clients. I do that less today than I did, say, 5 or 6 years ago when I was really, really in the trenches. But I do like to keep writing for clients because the industry changes. Sometimes it's harder to get clients than other times, and it's just really good for me to keep a hand in it. So, I'm currently working with a SaaS company to write some case studies about some features that they just launched and the tool that they're doing. So I do that, guess I would say, on the side. That used to be my main business. That's now
Yeah.
kind of my side business. And where I focus almost all of my time is with the Copywriter Club. We basically have programs and coaching for copywriters who, like I said, want to get better, especially the business side. But as writers, I have a podcast as well, have lots of different workshops and small products to help people, understand some of the things that we teach, things like building your authority and how do you find clients, or how do you write emotional copy, right? We have products like that, and then coaching as well, as copywriters need help building the business that they're building.
I don't know if I know the story of how, because we have similar businesses, right? Like, we were
Yeah.
both practitioners. We do the work, we do the client work. We found ourselves coaching. How did you start doing that?
So as I was working my freelance business, I got an email one day from Bluehost, and the email said, "Hey, there's all of these new domain names that are coming online. Instead of .com or .edu, .net. I think there were like 10 initially. Now there's dozens, maybe even hundreds of them. And one of them was .club. And I just had the idea. I was like, I wonder if like something Copywriter Club, if there's an idea there. So I just bought that URL and it just kind of sat in my account for a little while. I was in another mastermind with a bunch of copywriters, and then I thought, maybe I want to launch a podcast. And the idea of the Copywriter Club, started as a podcast. And then I partnered with my then business partner, Kira Hug. We ran the Copywriter Club, the podcast, and the programs together for about 7 years. She decided to move on from the business last year, and so I've been doing it on my own since then.
So it really started as a domain,
Yeah,
and not
Yeah.
really a plan.
I didn't start out thinking, I'm going to start coaching copywriters. What can I do? It actually was, there's an idea. I wonder what that could turn into. We started with the podcast. We launched a Facebook group at the same time we launched the podcast, and we started
Okay.
inviting all of the copywriters we could possibly find. We would search them out online and just say, hey, come join this group. And we started watching the conversations that were happening in the Copywriter Club Facebook group. And we saw, people asking a ton of questions about, like, how do you choose a niche? How do I price this product that I have? How do I find clients? And we took those questions, we put them all together. We created our first program, not really a course. It's, a program that people would go through just to figure out all of those business things. And
Okay.
that's really where the coaching launched.
Oh, wow. It's so fascinating to know you didn't start with like that end game. You're not like the 22-year-old VA coach who's like suddenly, coaching everybody because she could see where the money was. Like it just happened naturally. And then you created the product to fit
Yep.
the need.
Exactly. The person who starts out thinking, "Ooh, I want to be a coach. I don't have any experience." Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a bit of experience. I've worked, in ad agencies. I've worked in three different in-house groups. I've built a company that wasn't a copywriting business, right? A software company. Like I've done the things. I went and got an MBA. So like when I help people, it's coming from a pretty broad range of experience and not just because I took a course at, a life coach school.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for that. Okay. I'm curious because you've had all this experience, you've had all these copywriters come through. What's the number one reason that keeps somebody from not launching their business? Because I know you and I both get the starter questions. Like, why would someone not do it? What do they tell you?
I think it's mostly out of fear. That people feel like they're not ready. There's a lot of imposter complex, even with people who have the right experience or the know-how. We tend to question ourselves and say, well, maybe I'm not ready. I need to know more about this thing. There's one more book to read. There's one more course to take. There's one more coach to work with. And so we hold back until we feel like we have the confidence to move forward. And the thing about confidence is it only comes from doing the thing that you need to get confident at. And so you have to have some kind of courage first to step out and say, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Obviously, you don't want to brag that you can, get all of these results or whatever, because you don't actually know that. But as you do the thing, you start to get the results. That builds the confidence. And so I guess if I were going to say, advice to somebody who thinks, well, maybe I'd like to do this, do it. Step out. Go and do it. Don't wait for somebody to anoint you and say, yes, you're ready. You become ready by stepping forward and saying, okay, I'm going to try this.
Yes, I just had this conversation with an old junior high friend who her job just moved her to she's in Omaha and now she has to commute to Lincoln and she just DM'd me out of the blue. I don't really talk to people from high school. And she's like, how did you do it? What did you do? And she's asking me all the business questions. And it's so interesting to be in that situation. And I was stepping back and thinking about it. I'm like, I'm not the best person to tell you to start a freelance business or a consulting business. But in the end, she just needed to hear that, what you just said. Just do
Yeah.
it. Just do it. You already have the skills and the specialization. And I don't know if she will. We'll see what happens.
Well, it takes a certain kind, right? I mean, especially if you're going to
Yeah.
freelance, you need to have the ability to go and find clients. As you're starting out, you might be lucky. I certainly was when I first launched, to really do freelance. I had a lot of contacts because I'd been working in-house in
Mhm.
so many different
Yep.
areas. So I could reach out to all of my warm contacts. They knew the work that I could do. But after about a year, those relationships, it's not that they dry up because you can keep working with them, but that's not enough to sustain your business. And so you've got to
Yeah.
start bringing in new clients. And that's where freelancing can become hard for some people, especially introverts. And there's a lot of copywriters who are very, very introverted. We don't necessarily love coming out of our homes or our offices or whatever, but you have to have that ability to reach out to people and say, hey, you have a problem and I can help you fix that, or I can help you solve that, or I can take you from where you are now to where you want to be, and let's work together.
Beautiful, because that's what we're going to talk about today is this whole idea of building your authority online so that you're visible, people trust you, people come and pay your prices. They're not trying to get, a copywriter for 20 bucks an hour. So you have a framework you're going to share with us, right?
So I have thought a lot about this, because as I've seen people in the copywriting world, in the marketing world, it struck me that the best writers and the best marketers aren't always the ones that we see or that we even think, hey, I need to work with that person. We see the person who has the visibility, who's out there talking about it. And so as I started thinking about what it takes to build authority, I put together this a little framework that helps me think about it and think through the way that these different pieces intersect and the things that I need to be doing. And so, yeah, I'm happy to share that with you.
Well, I guess let's start with the whole reason, like, why do we need authority anyway as a service provider?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that whole idea that I was just saying is the best copywriter isn't always the one that people hire. In fact, you
Yeah.
can be the very best copywriter in the world, and if nobody knows about you, it does not matter. You cannot share your gift with the world. You can't change anybody's life, and you can't change your own life. You can't make money because nobody's coming to you because they've never heard of you. They don't know, how you can help them. So it's absolutely critical that we have some kind of authority or celebrity. Some people might call it an influencer. I think an influencer is a little bit different, because
Yeah.
an actual authority has the first piece of the framework, which is expertise, real expertise in the thing that you do. And this applies not just to copywriting, but to design, to programming, to social media, to anything that you're stepping forward and saying, hey, I can help you solve this problem. You have to have some expertise. And now, in saying that, that doesn't mean you need 10 years of expertise. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you need to have, 10 clients under your belt that have all delivered, X results. But it does mean that you've got to be able to do this thing relatively well so that as you continue to grow your expertise and share what you're doing, people can look and say, oh, yeah, that person understands that thing.
So, how do we show expertise? Does this mean a portfolio? Does this mean case studies?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it, and there's kind of a combination between these three elements that lead us to do it. So can
Okay.
I push
Okay.
that question off just a little
Okay.
bit?
All right.
Okay, so the second element of the authority framework after expertise is trust. It's one thing to be an expert, but you've also got to have the trust of prospects, of your audience, of the people who you are able to serve. And trust is built in the doing, in delivering what you say. So, if you say, hey, I will hit this deadline, you got to hit the deadline. If you say, here's the estimate, you've got to hit the estimate. If people are trusting you to do something, you delivered that thing. So that's maybe the best way to build trust. Obviously, there are other ways to say borrow trust. And in fact, this is something that I did as I built the Copywriter Club that really helped me. So I launched this podcast, the Copywriter Club podcast, and I invited experts in the copywriting world to come and join me, and to talk about the things that they do. Well, one of the benefits of that is when people see you talking to other experts about the thing that you are an expert at, they start to trust you as if you were also an experienced expert. And we launched an event and had the same kind of a thing. So, I throw an event and people who never would have heard of Rob Marsh, but have heard of people like Paris Lampropoulos or Mike Kim or Dana Malstaff, or, all the myriad of experts that have come onto our stage and shared their knowledge and expertise with, again, the people who showed up to my event. That reflects well on me. So obviously you need expertise, but you also need to be doing things to build trust as you're growing your expertise.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of us are familiar with no like trust factor, but does this mean we all have to be on podcasts? Because the introverts and some of us might be just like cringing.
Yeah, so that actually brings up part number three of the framework, which is visibility.
Okay.
And so, do you need to be on podcast? No, you don't need to be on podcast, but you need to be somewhere. You need to be somewhere where people can find you. So, there's not really a way to build authority if people can't see you. And so, you can do this in so many different ways, right? Podcasting is one, and podcasting is a great way to do it. In fact, I recommend podcasting for the specific reason that podcasting is the most intimate source of media available anywhere. So think about this. We all experience, advertisements, media marketing outside of ourselves. It's on the billboard, it's in the magazine, it's on the radio, it's on the TV, it's in the flyer that comes in the mail, it's on the screen, right? Like it's out there. But with podcasts, almost everybody listens to podcasts with headphones on. And when you hear a voice inside your head, that is a very different experience than experiencing marketing on the outside. Now I'm inside your head talking to you in the same place you do your thinking. And that is a really special place to be. And so I understand a lot of people don't want to hear their own voice or whatever, but there is something in podcasting where we can connect to listeners better than any other kind of marketing. So I think people should consider that. But having said that,
Yeah.
you can write a book, you can write blog posts, you can, create videos, you can post content that doesn't have you in it at all, right? Like you can create workshops and webinars and, there's so many ways to show up and do this thing. So it doesn't have to be podcasting. It doesn't have to be video, but it has to be something. You have to
Yeah.
choose something.
I feel like a lot of people think they need to go out and start their own podcast. And usually I'm advising the service providers. I don't know, it's a case by case situation, but it's not always the best to
Correct.
go out and do your own like you did, like I did, kind of blindly and naively. But I think guesting on shows is a really good place to start. My first visibility unintentionally, because I was very naive when I was really like the beginning, was teaching a workshop in a membership on how to like comb through Google Analytics. It was the old version and just see
Uh-huh.
where your traffic's coming from. And I was just teaching creative entrepreneurs. And I mean, my calendar blew out from that because everyone needed that kind of technical, marketing help. Do you remember yours?
My first podcast is the one that I started. So my
Your
very
own?
first episode was my own podcast.
I
Yeah. And
wasn't
I was
sure.
bad at it. If people go back and listen to those first 10 episodes, there was actually a point where, as I was listening to myself, I used to do all of the editing for the podcast. And so I
Oh
would listen
dear.
back 3 or 4 times and I was just like, man, I am just not great at this. And at the time, Kira was my co-host, and I realized that she was actually a really good question asker. And so I'm like, what's the difference between what she's doing and what I'm doing? And I started with a list of questions. And that was kind of my go-to is like, okay, we answered that question. I'll go to my next question. Kira,
Yeah.
Kira was listening to what the person was saying and following up with like, oh, wait, that's an interesting idea. I mean, I don't know why this was a new thing to me. Like, oh, listen to the people you're talking to. Come on, Rob. But as soon as I realized that, our podcast changed and it was less. In fact, we stopped sending questions to our guests. We basically say, hey, we're going to start with your story and then we're just going to go wherever the conversation goes. Because I know there are some things I definitely want to ask. When I have you, Emily, on the show, right? I know you're expert at, finding the marketing assistant thing and the unicorns and PR. Like there are things that I know I can ask you about, but it's best if that comes out of your story and the conversation rather than, me just saying, okay, now tell me about PR. Okay, now tell
Yeah.
me about marketing assistants. Okay, tell me, that actually ends up being kind of a boring podcast.
Those are the worst. I've been on a few where the guest did that and it felt like it didn't really matter what I answered. They were already moving to the next thing. And I like the conversation. And I
Yeah.
sometimes like to turn around and ask the host a question. So I'm like, well, what did you see? And what did you witness? And to me, that's just more fun. But yeah,
Yeah,
I think a private podcast would also be a good place to start for some
for
service
sure.
providers too, to like test it out, see how it's doing, use it, strategically within their funnels and demonstrate those 3, expertise, build the trust. What's your 4th one in the framework?
Well, so it's those three. I'm going to share my screen now because
Okay.
I set them up like as a Venn diagram because there's places where they intersect,
Yeah.
and I think it can be really helpful to look at the ways that they intersect as we think about this. So when you think about how expertise and trust intersect, that is your content. If you're just listening in your headphones, I apologize that there's a visual element to this. But if you want to see the visuals, I will share a link at the end of our interview and you can jump in for free, see the little workshop that I have that I walk through this. But where expertise and trust come together, that's your content, right? You're teaching the stuff that you know to an audience in a way that helps people to trust you. Again, whether that's something that you're writing, whether that's something you're teaching, like you did, teaching about Google Analytics, whether it's some other thing, this is your content, your way of showing up. And the great thing about this is the more you do it, the more trust you build. The intersection between trust and visibility is your audience. So they trust you. This is where you're showing up. and being in front of them so that they can see who you are, what you do, and then the intersection between expertise and visibility is your platform. And this is where you promote. So, whether you do this through paid ads or whether you do this through organic content, you need to be thinking, where is my audience? I'm going to be on that platform. So, if you're talking to coaches, there are a lot of coaches on Instagram. You probably want to be there. If you are talking to marketing, let's say marketing VPs, directors of marketing, they're all on LinkedIn. They also might be on Facebook or Instagram, but they show up on LinkedIn in that role, right? So you definitely want to be on LinkedIn. Maybe you also want to add some other thing. If you are talking to content creators and maybe you want to help them with social media, right? They're on a place like TikTok, right? So you want to be there where they are. The way that expertise, trust, and visibility come together leads you to know what content do you want to teach, who are you teaching it to, and where are you teaching. And then what's crazy is the more you teach, the more you have content to promote. And the more you promote, the more you engage the audience that you have. And the more you engage your audience, the more they're going to ask questions and say things that give you more ideas that turn into content for you to teach. And it kind of, is this cycle that it just suddenly becomes really easy. So the very first time you show up to teach something can be really hard. But by
Mhm.
the 10th time and you start promoting it and engaging, and then the 20th time or the 30th time, it almost becomes a flywheel where it's so automatic and part of what you do that it's a natural part of your business. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I really liked what you said about the engaging part with your audience because I'm constantly getting feedback, ideas, comments, questions that push me deeper. So I'm not even getting sick of my own content because it just
Exactly.
follows the circle around over to the other side.
Exactly. Yeah. The more you engage, the more that this reinforces itself. And again, this is all about building authority. As you do it, your authority grows and more people are attracted to you. They come to you for answers, for help, even just for inspiration. And a large chunk of that audience may never engage with you one-on-one, but they're watching what you do. They, are following your advice. They're trying to implement it into their own lives. So like I said, it's a flywheel. Then once you get it going, it's almost hard to stop.
So where the heck do you start if you're somebody who just graduated from UDMA school? They're hanging out in the work group. Like I have a whole assessment where you come in the work group and you find out your phases. And a couple of them like push very heavy into this type of, visibility, like getting yourself out there, being seen and positioned as an expert. But then I think about the people in phase one. How do you plug yourself in?
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. Depending on where you are in your career, in your knowledge base, in what you're doing, changes things a little bit. So if you are just starting out, you've got to start with expertise. You've got to grow that specialty, that one thing, and you've got to find one problem that you can solve for somebody it's painful enough that somebody's going to pay you to solve it for them, right? There are all kinds of problems out there that just don't ever rise to that level of, okay, it's so painful, I'm going to pay money for it. I'll just tolerate that stuff. And that's not a good enough problem. So you've got to start with that one problem. Once you have that, though, now it's about, okay, how do I talk about this thing that I do? If you know how to solve a problem, you probably have a process that you go through. Certainly by the third or fourth time, you've done it enough that okay, these are the 4 or 5 steps that I need to do to solve the problem. Now you've got a process. A process is an idea that you can talk about. That's content, right? The problem that you solve is content. The solution that you deliver is content. The more that you do it for clients, every one of those is a customer story, or what we often we'll call a case study, right? That's content. Anytime somebody brings you a problem and you're thinking about it or presenting ideas, that's content. If you learn a new approach from, maybe you hire a coach or you go through a program and that helps you to understand maybe a better way to do the thing, that's content, right? So you want to be documenting all of these things that you're doing and sharing that on the platform with your audience.
Yeah, sometimes it can be as simple as me. I'm just thinking of things I did in the past strategically, sharing the sales page I just built. I didn't write them, but I would design them and just sharing the insight or like how I took the next step a little bit behind the scenes. Is there a difference between more like higher authority content and just regular content, or does it all fit into your framework?
think a big part of the difference is how much authority you've built over time. So, in the copywriting world, there's a copywriter, his name's Gary Bencivenga. A lot of copywriters haven't heard of him, but those that do revere him as probably the best living copywriter in the world today. He's famous for like nobody could ever beat his control. So when he would write something, if anybody else went up against him, you wouldn't beat him. Like he
Oh,
never lost. That's probably not entirely true. He probably lost once or twice, but his reputation is that he never lost. An incredibly smart guy. He's sold a course about his process and how he does it, and charged thousands of dollars. Held a live event to come. Somebody coming from that level of authority is seen as an authority by virtue of all of the things that they've done through their career. But I will tell you, there are copywriters with 2 or 3 years of experience who are teaching pretty much the same things that Gary would teach. They don't have the same level of authority because they don't have the same experience. They haven't done it as many times, but the concepts are very similar, sometimes even the same, right? And so, as far as like, is there a higher level or lower level? I would say it's mostly differentiated by your own expertise and experience and what you bring to the table. With
yeah.
the one exception is if you have your own ideas that you start to teach. And
Mm,
this is where I think content becomes really different is when you have your own IP and you can talk about it in a way that is unique to you. Now, it may be the same ideas or similar ideas, but because you're talking about it in your way, in your voice to your audience, maybe your process, the steps are a little bit different from the way that I would do it, or you've got an idea and you express it like I just showed you my authority framework, right? Those kinds of ideas also help build authority because those are yours and you own them. And really, you are the only one that can talk about them because, again, they're yours, right?
yeah, I'm glad you separated that out because I feel like there's a lot of pressure to show up like Alex Hermosi with 300 different reels, like, and then everyone's copying him on the
Yeah,
stages
don't do that.
now.
Alex
And
has a big
oh,
team. Don't copy
yeah.
Alex. And not only that, but what's crazy is Alex is playing a totally different game than
Yeah.
you or I or most other people are playing. He is not trying to land a coaching client. Alex is
Yeah.
looking for people where he can invest in their businesses, right? So he's
Yeah.
giving away a ton of stuff for free because he's
Yeah.
in a whole other game. And when you or I look at Alex and we're saying, oh, whoa, I need to be doing what Alex is doing. Well, we're not even in the same business as Alex. And I'm not talking about coaching gyms. I'm
Yeah.
talking about like the investment side and what he's really doing. It's really dangerous to look at that level and
Yeah.
say, "Oh, I need to be doing that."
Well, I've actually thought about someone who was a guest on your show. Oh my gosh, Emily, don't butcher it. Is it Heather Parody? Is it
Yeah,
Heather?
Heather, she's awesome.
Oh my God, that was such a good episode. But I was thinking about that. And when I heard that episode and watched her reels, I thought, wow, that's a whole nother level of like thought leadership to bring. But you're saying we don't actually have to do that when we're
No,
starting and when we're service providers. We can, I'm going to regurgitate things that are out there and show what we're doing and still show that we're an expert without having original ideas.
yeah, exactly. Now, if you learned it from somebody, please credit them. We should be giving credit.
Yes.
So, if
Yes.
you're talking about Eugene Schwartz's 5 stages of awareness, say, hey, Eugene Schwartz talked about this in his book, Breakthrough Advertising, but you're still able to talk about those 5 stages and how you might apply them to a campaign or a funnel in your niche, right? Like, make that content apply to your audience in a way that's unique to you. Give Gene credit for the thing that he came up with, but you're now showing people how to apply that idea in their business. That's fair game. I wouldn't ever take your framework and say, I came up with this, right? That's blatantly dishonest and unethical, and don't do that. But if somebody were to say, hey, I learned this interesting authority framework where, Rob talked about expertise and visibility and trust and how they engage, right? Give credit and then apply it to your audience. Like that's fair game.
And tag Rob, and he'll start to
Sure.
notice you and then build a relationship with Rob. Yeah, I've heard of some of the drama going down on Instagram right now where they take the framework and they just like switch out one P for another. And we're like, no, 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 no. We don't
Yeah.
do that. And we can't blame Chat GBT either. Like it needs to be your stuff.
Yeah. There was kind of some drama a year or two ago on Twitter where, somebody who was teaching a writing course accused another writer, of stealing their content. And, the content was things like teach what you know, stuff that it's so like baseline copywriting
Yeah.
stuff that you're just like, wait a second, you didn't come
You
up with
can't
that.
trademark that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a level of stuff that you can teach that's just kind of like, it's just the information that's out there. But if you are learning something from a mentor, from a coach, or you've seen something on a video somewhere and somebody's, walked through their version of it, give credit, right?
Yeah.
It's just, it's a good way to do business.
I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. I know you're not going to like this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there any way to build authority faster?
Uh, well, sure. I mean, the obviously the expertise thing, you've got to bring that to the table.
Mhm.
But the more visibility, the more you show up, the faster that that's going to happen. So, we were talking about, whether people should start a podcast, on their own. When I started my podcast for copywriters, there were two other podcasts for copywriters at the time. Today, there's dozens, right? And I would say, okay, you probably don't need a podcast about copywriting, but your niche may need the ideas from copywriting and marketing taught to them in a way that's specific to that niche. So go ahead and start a podcast for that. But I would say if you really want to do this faster, yeah, start showing up in more places. So get on stages and teach the thing that you want to teach. Get on podcasts and talk about it. Write the book or write the articles or the blog post and put your energy into that. Whether you're posting it on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. Yeah, you can do it faster if you start showing up and doing more. Most of us have the trade-off is okay, but we also still have to do the work. Like
Yeah.
visibility itself doesn't pay. The reason that we build authority is to attract the clients that we can help solve their problem, and you still got to do that.
Yeah. Because what I see in our world is, somebody puts their name in for a job opening, the client goes and stalks them out. They're not impressed. And gone are the days. Like 4 years ago, I said, "Oh, you don't need a website," but it's gotten competitive. The market has changed. Even the title virtual assistant has evolved. There's less education about what it is. And I see time and time again freelancers, even in my own community, not putting the effort into those pieces, which are high authority, is like you need to look like you know what you're doing and demonstrate your expertise. And I think what really irks me is when, I don't know, let me pull out an example. Somebody is niching into copywriting, but yet they don't have a well-written website. It's like first marketing asset, like get that done.
Yeah, I think website tends to be table stakes. I do think that there are copywriters who are able to, not have a website.
Oh,
They do
good.
things that
Okay.
are very similar. So
Yeah.
this is actually something that we're actually talking about in our membership this week. But you do need a landing place where people can
Yes.
come and see what it is that you do. It doesn't necessarily have to be a website hosted, on Bluehost or whatever. It could be that you are directing people to a Google Doc that
Mhm.
has the things that a website would have. It's going to help you build trust. It's going to talk about the problem you solve. It's going to directly address, the problems that your clients, your prospects have, right? So like you can do that. You don't need to spend hundreds of dollars or have fancy photography, but you do need a place where people can find stuff about you. There are a bunch of services like something.me and
Yeah.
Bento, where you can basically put up a real quick one page, just a bunch of links to your things or whatever. Like, those services
Yeah.
exist for a reason. And if you're just getting started, but I think the bigger thing that you were saying beyond a website is like well written. I mean, if you're a copywriter, you've got to be able to write, right? There's table stakes. If
Mhm.
you're a designer and you're going to show me a design, it better look designed, right? It's got to be something better than I do. And I'm not a great designer, but if I
Mhm.
look at it and I think, oh yeah, I could do that, then you got a problem. Or
Yeah.
if a client can look at it and say, oh yeah, I can write that, I could design that, I can think like that, then you've got a problem. You need to be, this is again, going back to the expertise. Like you've got to have something that they don't have that you
Yeah.
can it's your flag to plant.
That makes me think what kind of content would undermine you and, erode your authority. And obviously what you talked about, like you're selling yourself as a graphic designer and everything's like a pre-made Canva logo.
Yeah.
Anything else, but I mean anything else when it comes to maybe the content we're putting out that could undermine us that you could think of?
Obviously anything that's unprofessional, right?
Okay.
So, if you are not well spoken, that can undermine you. Now, I'm not saying you need to have perfect English or, you need to have the Queen's accent or anything like that. For instance, let's say that your personal brand, you use the F word, you swear a lot, right? You are going to turn off a significant portion of an audience with that. And you just have to be conscious about that. If that's okay with you, great, lean into it. Another one that a lot of people I see doing this, and they do it intentionally, is alcohol, in their photos and on their web pages. Now, I know most people drink, right? But there's actually a scientific study that showed that if you are on your website with a drink in your hand, that people perceive you, and I'm talking about an alcoholic drink, not necessarily coffee or something, but they perceive you as less capable. And that's kind of an interesting finding. Now, there are a lot of people,
Wow.
yeah, who do it. And if that's your brand and you want to lean into it and you're okay with it, great. Just be aware that some of the ways we show up really do impact the way people think about you. If you're working with enterprise level clients, showing up in a t-shirt might not be your best bet, even if they do casual Fridays or, nobody at
Yeah.
the company wears a tie. I'm not saying you need to show up in a suit, but you ought to
Yeah.
look like you're showing up for work, right?
Or you could take your Def Leppard t-shirt and put a
Exactly.
jacket over it.
Put a jacket over it, and now you've stepped up your professionalism.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, people know your audience, and the way you show up is different than you might show up for, if you're prospecting and working with a client at, say, Apple or Microsoft. You want to present in a way that's not going to turn them off. It's going to show that you are capable. And as much as we hate that looks matter or that this stuff matters, it does matter. It still matters. And if you want to impress people and be taken serious as an authority, sometimes it helps to dress it up a little bit.
Yeah, that's total trust. And by the way, why are half the men on the dating apps right now have an alcoholic beverage in their first photo? Like,
And
no.
does that and I mean, I'm not into the dating app thing, but I wonder how that impacts, like how you think about them. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, is this somebody that I want to have a relationship with? Maybe,
Nope.
maybe not. But again, people do all kinds of crazy things on
Yeah.
dating apps, the weird
Yeah.
photos and cropped out partners. And yeah, there's
Fish. Yeah. No, but
exactly.
that's an interesting stat about the on the website, like how it affects us because we are judging. And that's why brand photos, like getting some simple headshots are just make all the difference. Okay,
Yeah.
I keep thinking about this situation in my head. I had a friend, an online friend who was really well known as an OBM, like ClickUp expert.
Uh-huh.
Hopefully she never listens to the show. And then suddenly 180 starts selling herself as a copywriter. And it was just kind of like, whoa, what happened? And these people just changing their specialties. And can you talk a little bit about, I don't know what I even want to ask here, Rob. Like, why was that wrong? Why did I suddenly not trust her? And what should she have done instead? Because I do know I have listeners who they're still evolving, they're figuring out their services. And we don't have to have it all figured out, but what she did just blew my mind.
Yeah, well, that's actually a really interesting case because people do evolve. You
Mhm.
can go from being an OBM to a copywriter. In fact, a lot of OBMs are writing copy as part of their jobs, right? So I think what happens in those situations is it's a positioning problem. Once we position ourselves in a specific way, you can't just like flip a switch, turn that off, and turn on a new positioning and bring the trust with you. Right? You've built a ton of trust in this thing, and I know you're showing up for this thing. So let me use like a non-provider example. So
Okay.
Volvo famously positioned as the safety car, right? They were known for their safety. You were safer in Volvo. But if Volvo were to, tomorrow, and they've actually started to move away from that positioning, which in my opinion is a mistake, but they don't hammer that like they used to. But if they suddenly showed up with, an SUV and tried to act like Jeep, will go anywhere, everywhere. That's so antithetical to what they were before that we wouldn't trust them to be that thing.
Mhm.
Now, can they move from one to the other? Of course you can. Gradually. So if I'm that OBM, be like, hey, I've been doing OBM work, but as part of my work, I've found that I love writing copy and I've helped my 10 clients create these sales pages or these email campaigns. And so I'm going to be leaning more into that. If I can help you with copy, let me know, right? Like there's step number one where you're leveraging the old position to start moving into a new position, right? And then after a while, people are seeing you showing up, talking about email or sales pages. You shift maybe more into that copywriting identity and you can bring the trust with you that way. So it's really just thinking through like, rather than an abrupt shift, oh, I was this and now I'm that. It's more, I've been doing this and I like this part of it and I'm going to lean more into that and it's going to get us to this next thing.
I like that because you're leaning into what you did in the past and still kind of
Exactly.
showing your expertise. And you think about it, that's how I even started my freelance business. I knew you would have a smart answer, by the way, but like leaning into the thing I already did well and then like adding more on and adding more on. And then next thing you know, I can't remember the last time I wrote a press release and got paid.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about your existing audience.
Mhm.
If an audience trusts you to do a thing, you need to explain to them, the shift. If you don't have an audience, then it doesn't matter. Change from the thing that you are to the thing you want to be. Nobody knows what you were before, right? And that's where we go back to the whole idea of expertise and trust and visibility, like they work together. And if you didn't have that visibility, then it's a lot easier to shift your expertise. If you've got the visibility, you need to help move your audience with you.
Okay. Speaking of this, I have to ask if you were starting over with your audience as a service provider, what are the first things you would do?
A couple of things. So I would look for a group or two that I could join to be a voice in. Where I can again start to build my expertise, become trusted by those people who are in the group. That might be a paid group. It might mean hiring, a mentor and being some paid coaching. It might be, joining a group on Facebook or something like that. But to show up there as an expert. Number two, I would create an offer that would appeal to whoever my audience is. And that would also affect what groups I would want to join. So I would have some kind of an offer so that I could build an email list. Email, absolutely critical. It's the one medium you can own, you can talk to directly. What I said about intimacy of podcasts, emails intimate number two, because you can talk to somebody one-on-one as opposed to broadcast everything, right? And so I'd have some kind of an offer, which means that I would need to identify a problem that I could solve that's sufficiently painful that I can charge money for it at some point and have that offer. And then I would start talking about that offer and how I solve that problem in these groups that I joined so that people can start to see that. Number three, I would start to pitch podcasts because I want to use other people's audiences. If I don't have my own audience, then I need to find people who have an audience that I can reach out to. And so especially I would be looking for podcasts in my niche, not necessarily, so I'm a copywriter. I would not necessarily be pitching copywriting podcasts because my customers don't listen to those, copywriters listen to those. And so
Yeah.
I would, if I'm going to be writing copy in the SaaS space, I'm going to start pitching podcasts that talk about SaaS marketing or, business problems that SaaS owners, developers, founders have and talk about, again, my offer, how I solve that problem. That's what I do. So start to cultivate my own expertise, create my own list, and then start borrowing other people's audiences.
I love that. I love that. I have a client I'm working with right now, and he's starting as the new kid on the block. I'm like thinking about how in your framework or what are we already doing in your framework to boost his authority? Because no one knows who he was. He was kind of a silent partner in this other business. And one thing we're doing for the trust is doing a State of the Union with the other top people in his industry to talk
That's
about what's
amazing.
going on. And it's just like a live, it's just a live. We just don't call it like a Facebook Live anymore. It'll be more put together. But immediately putting him in that top tier,
Yep. He's
started the email list.
borrowed authority, right? He's showing up with other
Yes.
trusted authorities. Yeah. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And what else are we doing? The email list is going. And then I was going to say, like, podcasting. That's exactly what I did. I started pitching him last week for different shows in his niche. We got a yes to a baby one, like in his niche. It has like 50 reviews. And I'm like, it's go time. Like, this is all we need is just to start leveraging these appearances as well. And so it's fun. This is where the work gets fun for me because like I get to do this behind the scenes, but it's also fun to teach freelancers how to do this for themselves. Like we can do it. We
Yeah.
have these skills. And your framework was awesome for kind of reminding us where we need to fit in and why we need to kind of be working on all of that at the same time. Why it's so important not to just hide behind our keyboard and expect clients to fall in our lap.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly right. And I guess the next step for your client will be, getting them on stages, right?
Mhm.
And having them show up at industry events or conferences. There are so many local type events that need speakers, even, just to fill in for 20 minutes or whatever. There's just so many opportunities. And log on to, whatever your event center, your convention space is in your town and see what's coming and see if you can't reach out to, some of those event holders. And there's just so many ways to do this.
I just joined my chamber finally. I've been a military spouse and never had any roots. So I finally joined Richmond. And my goal would be to teach a workshop just here in my own community, get those jitters out. I have done it before, but not really in my hometown. And I would say every freelancer, every service provider should be doing that too. And you can rent out space in the library. You can do an
Totally. Yeah.
Eventbrite. Yeah, you can do a meetup and you can start doing this.
Yeah. And if you do that, obviously you have somebody come with a camera. It doesn't even necessarily need to be professional, but you've got photos of you on stage, have them maybe video it. Now you've got a presentation that you can share as a lead magnet or to, send out to potential clients. This is, how I think about my process. Like there's so many ways to use this content once you start to create it. And it's just a
Mhm.
matter of being smart about capturing this stuff as we, start to engage our audience, grow our platform.
You're a genius for saying that. I know my friend Brenna McGowan did that. She spoke at something local and they recorded it. So now she has a recording. No,
Yeah.
no master plan. But then next thing you know, Mike, Stelzner is like, hey, let me listen to your talk. Let
Yeah.
me vet you by what we already have. And like, thank God she had something,
Yeah.
and then that opened a door. And now she's at social media marketing in March.
Brenna's amazing. Yeah.
I'm going to be her roomie. I'm
Nice.
going to be the B-roll girl, Rob.
Nice. Yeah. Well, there's some coattails worth tagging along on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I mean, it'll be fun. Okay, so you have this authority framework for us at the copywriterclub.com/authority. Thank you for sharing that. I think it'll give us all the focus on what we need to do when promoting ourselves, talking about ourselves, because that's really hard. What's really fun is I inadvertently scheduled 2 public speaking coaches to come on my podcast right after you. So like we'll just like ride that wave into,
Perfect.
how to speak. So, okay, Rob, where's the best way to connect with you?
So if you want to connect with me directly, I'm on LinkedIn at, I think that Rob Marsh or the Rob Marsh, but really listen to my podcast, Copywriter Club podcast, not just for me, but like I really do bring on some amazing guests. Emily, you have been one of them or will be one of them, depending on when we go live here.
Yeah.
But there's so many smart things to do. If you want to be a copywriter, a content writer, or a freelancer of any kind, listen to that podcast. There are different ways to jump onto my list at thecopywriterclub.com. And of course, you can always join our free Facebook group on Facebook. Just search for the Copywriter Club.
And I'm going to plug your podcast. You give really tactical how to. So, teaching hooks, teaching copy. And I think any marketer should be listening. And I love those podcasts that actually teach. So thank you. Thank you for bringing on good guests. I really do love it.
Yeah, I mean, the credit really does go to the guests. It makes all the difference. If it was just me, maybe, but yeah, the guests are awesome.
Well, that's because you were smart and started your podcast first. Okay. Do you have any parting words of encouragement for a freelancer right now, just in the trenches, doing the work, wondering where their next client is coming from?
Well, I think when we're talking about authority, one of the big hangups is, okay, I'm not ready. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, and I would just say, just start. Just start with where you're at. Talk about the thing that you're doing today. If you didn't do something today, talk about the thing that you just read today that applies to, talk about what you're learning. Talk about the kinds of things you want to do. Talk about the kinds of problems that you want to solve, right? Like, just start, whether it's one post a week or, if you can't even manage that, one post a month, but start. Don't wait to be chosen. Don't wait until you feel ready. You never will get there. You just have to start and the readiness will come.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Thanks so much, Rob.
Yeah, thank you.